to C-Fan Sports, the sports show that is dedicated to the Seattle sports fans. My name is Dave. This is Kevin. Kevin, are you all warmed up for training camp?
I am jacked for training camp. I cannot wait.
Jack, you know, things got a little easier in the West today. Cam Akers tore an Achilles, but we're not here to talk about that. I know we're upset. The number 4 power ranked team took a little bit of a hit today, but we're not talking about that. It's list season. Now, before we get into list season, Kevin, I want to go ahead and encourage everybody, please turn on your notifications, subscribe if you're new here, because you know what? Why not? We're a couple of good guys. Leave us comments down below. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong. Yeah, we want some of those thumbs ups.
Yeah.
But if you have to, thumb down. Kevin says no, but you know what? It's America, and you guys can thumb it down if you want to.
True.
And so what we're going to do now is we're going to come up with our list of top 10 Seahawks of all time. Everybody's got all kinds of lists. I've seen lists for this. I've seen lists for that. And for me, I want to dive into who we think are the top 10 Seahawks of all time. Now, of course, just like always, Kevin can't play by the rules.
No.
So Kevin has 11. So we're going to let Kevin go with his number 11 first. Then I will follow through with number 10 and then his 10 and so on and so forth until we get down to our number 1 player. We're going to see where we match up. See if we don't know what each other's got here. So we're going to see where we match up and where things are different. So Kevin, your number 11, drum roll please, is
the backstory on this pick is Dave and I have been friends for 20 some years.
Gotcha.
And our biggest fight, Dave's biggest blow up at me was this player. So my number 11 is an inside joke, Matt Flynn.
Matt Flynn.
So the joke was when we got Russell and they are all competing for that first spot. Dave was the biggest Russell fan to ever live. And I just kept saying, no, Matt Flynn should start. I think we should sit him on the bench, make him sit behind Matt for a year. And Dave's blood was boiling. So it was
true story.
That was my inside joke.
And so the test of time, I proved to be right. Kevin proved to be wrong.
Well, I agreed.
He was just doing it to get my goat. Allegedly.
I agreed with Russell, but I was just having fun. So,
all right, Kevin. So we're going to start out with my number 10. My number 10 is is an undrafted free agent. Okay, and it's number 89. My number 10 is Doug Baldwin. Doug Baldwin was so clutch for us for so many years. Man, I tell you, he as a wide receiver, he stuck his nose in where it didn't belong, and he came out with big catch after big catch. He played hurt. He made Russell look better all the time. He even made Tavares Jackson look good for a year. I really believe, as far as if I have to create a top 10 list, he has to be on it for me as a Seahawk. So my number 10 is Doug Baldwin. Kevin, who's your number 10?
My number 10 is a linebacker by the name of Lofa Tatupa.
Oh, wow.
I love the underdog. I love the short guy that shouldn't be there, the underweight guy that shouldn't be there. He was unbelievable for somebody that shouldn't have been our middle linebacker. He ended up with having 410 tackles and 33 tackles for loss throughout his career. Now, obviously, because of his size and his weight, he took a pretty good beating, and he kind of abused his body the time he was with the Seattle. So that's my number 10, the underdog.
That's a good number 10. He didn't even make my list, unfortunately, but man, I'll tell you, that's a good number 10. All right, my number 9, Kevin, is Cam Bam Chancellor. Number 31, man, I tell you, what a presence he was at safety. I still think that Vernon from San Francisco is looking over his shoulder every time somebody just has to run down the street and scream, "Hey, is that Cam?" And he falls to the ground.
Yep.
He wants nothing to do with Cam Chancellor. He's the one that set the tone in the Super Bowl. He brought the lumber all the time. One of my favorite plays is when he intercepted the ball and he's hammering it down as he's going into the end zone, leaping over offensive linemen to block kicks. Man, it just gets me all pumped up just to talk about Cam Chancellor. What a guy, what a safety he was. Kevin, I can't even, I get excited just thinking about football season and wishing Cam was behind in there. Hopefully Jamal will bring that same type of intensity. Kevin, who's your number 9?
My number 9 is a running back from the past in the 80s. His name was Kurt Warner.
Oh, wow. Okay. Out of Penn State.
Out of Penn State. He had 55 touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, 7 receiving. I mean, he had 4 1,000-yard seasons. And when I was back in the day, there was something about him that just, you knew if he was out there, he was gonna score.
He was the ground Chuck.
He was
the ground and the ground Chuck.
100%. And he was just a guy that just went out and was a lunch pail guy.
All right, so that's your number 9. My number 8 is a little cornerback out of Stanford. Yes, he's been in trouble lately, but to me, the guy that got us to that Super Bowl, the tip, which is probably my favorite play of any Seahawk, anytime. It meant so much to the city. It meant so much to the Seattle Seahawks fans, is Richard Sherman.
Yeah.
And first of all, I'd like to say my thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family for everything that he's going through personally and what his family has gone through as of last week. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm coming here to talk about him as a football player and what he meant to the city of Seattle during the LOB run. He's going to be my number 8 favorite Seahawk of all time is Richard Sherman. Kevin?
Well, my number 8 is a wide receiver, a guy that probably half the people on this podcast won't even know who he is, but his name was Bobby Wagner.
Another Penn State guy.
But maybe I have a thing for Penn State guys.
Yeah, maybe.
So Bobby was just one of those guys. He was never the flashiest, never the most spectacular, but once again, he was the lunch pail guy that would show up every day and always be in the right position at the right time. Somebody kind of like a Dougie B.
Right.
That I just love watching him play football. And again, this is because it's my fan, and that's why
it's your list, Kevin. You can do what you want.
It is my list. And
it's amazing. We're through our first 3, and we haven't had a repeat yet. So,
nope.
That tells us a little bit about where are some of our deep dives, some deep cuts. So my number 7, I'm going to go into the Wayback Machine myself. Number 45 himself, the Hitmaster, the guy that brought the lumber back in the 80s, Kenny Easley.
Yeah,
man, I tell you, watching him lay people out was a thing of beauty, and it was one of the things that got me excited about the game of football. He was just awesome, and we're getting ready for another football season, and I want to see some big hits, and we've had a lot of big hitting safeties, from Kenny Easley to Ken Hamlin to Cam Chancellor, Earl. He was the one that started it all.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
That's my number 7. Kevin, give me your number 7.
Well, my number 7 is a toss-up between 4 quarterbacks.
Again, rules or something Kevin is not good at.
I'm not good at following rules. So my number 7 is, I'm a diehard UW fan, and my number 7 is Warren Moon.
All right.
The man, even though he wasn't with Seattle very long, he was just an outstanding quarterback, and I loved everything about him. I also, you got Jim Zorn, Matt Hasselbeck, you got Russell Wilson. I mean, how do you not, there's not room for everybody on the board. But out of all the quarterbacks, Warren Moon was special for me.
All right. So number 1, Warren Moon.
Number
at
1.
your number 7.
Yep.
All right. My number 6 out of Utah State.
Oh, yeah.
Little Bobby.
Little
Bobby Wagner has been better than we could have ever asked for. He has been a rock. He has held down the middle of that defense. Everybody else is getting accolades, and everybody else is getting nicknames, and all little Bobby does is come in and perform. And he is been outstanding. And he has not only just been outstanding on the field, but off the field as well. I could not be more proud every time I put on my 54 Wagner jersey and wear that, because, he has been a pillar of that defense for a long time. Yes, sometimes I question where we are going forward with Bobby, but that does not diminish anything close to what he has brought for year in and year out. Since the day he was drafted as middle linebacker, he stepped into that role and has excelled right alongside Russell. So for me, my number 6, little Bobby Wagner.
It's hard
Kevin,
to argue.
your 6.
It's hard to argue with that one. My number 6 is a guy named Jacob Green, a defensive end.
79.
He had 115 and a half sacks in his career for Seattle.
Kevin, and by the way, that is not a confirmed number. He could have had more, because the stack record was not held when he was at the beginning of his career.
That
just
is true.
saying.
Yeah. And so Jacob Green was just, when I was a kid playing football, I was a defensive end.
Gotcha.
And I love watching this guy play football. I mean, he was electric. And that's why I've got him where I've got him.
All right. So your number 6, Jacob Green.
Mm-hmm.
My number 5, Kevin, another defensive tackle, Cortez Kennedy. Cortez Kennedy locked down the number 1 defense in the NFL on a team that went 2-14.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how can you compute that? You can't. He spent more time in the backfield than some of the opposing opposing teams' running backs. He was amazing. He was built like a tank. He had speed. He had power. If he played in today's NFL, Aaron Donald would be second best defensive line. Cortez Kennedy was just that good.
Yep.
And again, a guy that came in and didn't say too much and just performed on the football field. I love Cortez Kennedy. He is my number 5 all-time greatest Seahawk. Kevin?
Well, my number 5 was already on your list by the name of Cam Chancellor.
Oh, you got Bam Bam at 5. All right.
Bam Bam was 5. It really came down to the opposing offense, the wide receivers, the tight ends. They did not want to mess with Cam. That Vernon Davis play is still the highlight of one of my favorite plays of my entire life. Of all the years I've been a fan of the Seahawks, that play was unbelievable. So Cam is my number 5.
And if you folks don't know what that is, just type in Vernon Davis, Cam Chancellor in your YouTube browser. You'll find out.
You'll find out.
Yeah. It'll make your teeth hurt. Just watch it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. My number 4, Kevin, beast mode. Beast mode. Beast mode. When we got Marshawn Lynch, the Buffalo Bills had given up on him.
Mm-hmm.
And he came over here, and all he did was take a team that was 7-9, put him on his back, and rush through everybody to a touchdown against the Saints when we were not supposed to be in that game at all to help us win. The Beastquake to me is another one of the pillars of the great Seahawks plays of all time. I give it the tip with Richard Sherman, the slight edge, because that put us through the Super Bowl. But to me, watching Beast Mode run and do all the things and listen to his crazy antics on the everywhere in interviews, I just love listening to Beast Mode. He walks to his own drum.
Yep.
He is he's the number one running back on my list. And it's not like we didn't have running backs to choose from. We could have gone Sean Alexander.
Yep.
We could have gone. You went with Kurt Warner, but to me, in all-time Seahawks, as far as of the number 4 position for me, it was Marshawn Lynch, Beast Mode. Kevin, who's your number 4?
Well, my number 4 is on your list as well.
Boy.
His name is Kenny Easley.
Oh, there we go.
He's not my number 1 defensive player on the team. He wrote the book on how to play.
Right.
And how to hit.
Mm-hmm.
And all these guys, like you talked about, like Marcus Blair, Cam Chancellor, all the guys that are hitting safeties, those guys, I mean, Kenny easily started it all.
Yep.
And I love the guy, and he's my number 4.
Number 4, excellent. My number 3, I kind of built a little bit of a movie around Kevin, because he always ain't down the blind side. My number 3 was Walter Jones. Yeah. I've met this man before, shook his hand, and I'm 6'3", right about. I'm a big dude. Okay, I'm sure you guys can't see. I look tiny on camera, but he dwarfed me.
Oh yeah.
Walter Jones, when he would train, he would push an Escalade up a hill. That's how he trained. That was his training camp. Okay, he would push an Escalade. I can't push an Escalade down across flat ground, maybe even not downhill. But man, I tell you, Walter Jones, probably in a lot of people's rankings, is probably the greatest Seahawk of all time. One of the greatest offensive linemen of all time, if not the greatest left tackle to ever lace him up. There's an argument to be made for him every time. For me, number 3 is far as greatest Seahawks of all time, Walter Jones. Kevin, who's your number 3?
My number 3 is on your list as well, Marshawn Lynch, because he's just here so he don't get fined.
He's just here.
It's all about the ball, boss.
All about the ball.
So he's my number 3.
He's your number 3?
Yeah. You just can't. There isn't a better running back in probably all of football that marches to his own drum and just is unbelievable character on and off the field. And he's just he's a role model for a lot of people, even though he's,
there's dude, watching him and Gronkowski play Madden that was classic.
Well, the thing about Marshawn is that he is who he is. And so for all these people out there that are trying to do things by the book or trying to do things because they want to be successful or they want to do that, he did it with being who he is.
Absolutely.
And, hey, Marshawn Lynch, my number 3.
My number 2, number 3, I can't count. Counting's hard. My number 2, in our opening segment that we did for this, it was my favorite Seahawk until my number 1 came along. But my number 2 is Steve Largent. Steve Largent is what? Wait,
how could he be your number 2?
He's my number 2, and I'll explain why. I will explain my reasoning for my number 1 when we get there. But my number 2, Steve Largent, Mr. Seahawk, all you have to do is go back to the Atwater situation where Atwater laid him out, and then the next game he laid Atwater out. All the great catches. If you don't know anything about Steve Largent, go watch pull up Steve Largent YouTube, watch the catches. You'll be amazed. Steve Largent, my number 2. Kevin, who's your number 2?
Cortez Kennedy.
Cortez Kennedy. Okay.
You can't argue with what you said about somebody that had the number 1 ranked defense on a 2-14 team. And if we would have just had a halfway decent offense, we would have won playoff games and Super Bowls with that defense because of Cortez Kennedy. He was an unstoppable force.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Just you can't, as a fan of the game itself, you have to be a huge fan of Cortez Kennedy. So there's my number 2.
All right. We're evidently going to go into debate territory, so let's get it done. My number 1 has been probably for the last couple of years, Russell Wilson. Yes, I know what we have coming up in the future, but I'm talking about the time up until today, what he has meant to the city of Seattle, what he has meant to the football team. No other player has been as polarizing. No other player has been as steps in big game moments and doesn't shrink. He brings, he brings a calmness. He brings, when there is not a game that I have ever watched that Russell Wilson has not been under center where I didn't feel it up until the very last breath that we had a chance to win that game. There's been very few that we were ever blown out in. We were competitive because of Russell Wilson. All the years, all of the quarterbacks that we have suffered through, the Stan Gelbos, the Dan McGuires, even Dave Craig, because Dave Craig would shrink in some big time moments.
Yeah.
Even the Jim Zorn, who was just journeyman, and you want to bring on Warren Moons and things of that nature.
Trent Dilfer,
Tavares Jackson, all of the different players that we have seen. And again, just like little Bobby Wagner, from day one, he stepped in and said, I'm the man. You're going to have to beat me out. I'm going to take control of this team, of this city. And he has done it all. He's won a championship, which we've never had before. All he's got left is some MVPs and maybe another couple of Super Bowls, and he will go down as one of the all-time greatest quarterbacks to ever lace him up. And for me, that's what puts him as my number 1 Seahawk of all time. Kevin?
Yeah, he didn't make my list of the top 10, and it wasn't the fact that anything he hasn't done. He has been absolutely amazing. He has been the rock of our Seattle's team in the last 13 years. I mean, or whatever, 9 years. I don't know how long he's been playing. But since he came here, he's just been one of the best players on
all of football.
On all of football. So I get it. It's hard not to understand why you would pick him as your number 1. I'm not going to argue with it at all. It's a solid pick.
You can. It's my list.
It is your list. I have to go with Steve Largent. To me,
Steve's your number 1. Okay.
Steve Largent is the all-time Seahawk player. And even if Russell does bring a couple more championships, it'd be hard to argue. But overall, there wasn't anybody better. The guy he's not fast enough. He's, not the best receiver in the league, but he broke every record in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And for
it was a 4th round draft pick out of Houston that Houston gave away for nothing.
For nothing.
And here he came to Seattle and just became unstoppable.
Right. And that's why he's my number 1. And no offense to Russell. I really, really love watching Russell play football. I mean, I've had a lot of these people that were my favorite players at certain times, and that's why he didn't make my list. But Steve Largent, my number one.
Well, you guys have an opportunity to tell us where we're right, tell us where we're wrong. Kevin and I have a few that we have on the same players, but not in different. That's weird that we have a couple players, but they're not in the same place.
Yep.
So, leave us comments down below. Tell us where we're right. Tell us where we're wrong.
Well, tell us what your top 10 are.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you can give us top 3. I don't care what you do.
Kevin, I got to say something. That was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And I don't play very well. I had to leave off people like Max Strong, Pork Chop, Womack. There's so many great players. Steve.
I wanted to put on some Rufus Porter.
Rufus, exactly.
Tad Brown. There was a lot of players that I wanted to put on there, but I didn't because I had to boil it down to 10. You get 11, I got 10. I don't.
Sean Springs. Brian Blades. We had so many great players in Seattle's history, so it was really tough.
All right. Again, leave a comments. We're going to be here next week. We are going to be talking about the upcoming. We're basically going to be on the eve of training camp next week, and we'll have hopefully a new Jamal Adams deal to talk about. Maybe a new player or two signed to our roster. Kevin, we've got lots to talk about next week. See you next week. Peace.
Go Hawks.
Yeah.